basic access to quality education. This is just a shot of their main webpage. And then what I found through I actually found it through the library here, was a study that was done. They offer one program called Going Global, and that is an exchange program for high school students. So they send high school students to their field projects on actual exchange programs, which I thought was great. I was looking at that when I was working on our study tourist model to see if we could learn anything. And I just found their study really enlightening. It's called Raising Societal Support for Development Cooperation, the Role of Student Exchange. And you can see here in this picture a young woman making a presentation about her experience. So she's coming back and she's sharing what she learned in the field. Their major finding, okay, not theirs, but what I thought was a major finding in their research, they had a lot of really good information. What they did was send out a survey of about 40 questions to past student participants. They also sent it to the participants' classmates, and then another group of students who had no exposure to the program as kind of a neutral group. So they had a lot of amazing findings, but my favorite finding is that not only did the students who went on the program, their understanding of development get elevated, of course, but their classmates had an equal elevation of knowledge and understanding about development issues. So without the teachers incorporating anything into the class, or there being any formal required way of them sharing information, somehow all the kids in the class were more interested in development issues after one kid went abroad. So what that's showing is that there is a great diffusion of this knowledge. And that may seem minor, but when you're yeah, when you're trying to measure these kinds of education programs, it can be really difficult to pinpoint if it's making a difference or not. But to show that, so that's showing that there can be greater societal support for development and for international social justice if just a few people are taking action in their communities. This is a newspaper article of one of the girls who went abroad with the program, and that's just another way that the issues are being shared with press and the community and things like that. So, just checking my time here. Next, I want to talk about education for sustainability. So what that means is this kind of global citizenship education for the sustainability of the organization. So how does offering intensive donor education programs help keep the organization alive, help keep the mission going? And I'm going to refer here to an external impact evaluation that was done on Heifer's education programs by Western Michigan University. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Dr. Michael Scriven. I don't know. I kind of got into evaluation stuff a bit while working there, and I think in the evaluation world, he's like a quasi-celebrity. He's an Australian. He's like in his 80s, I think. He's been around a long time and helped shape the field. And I got to meet him. He was really interesting. But he did this with a team. He did this evaluation of all of Heifer's education programs, and I coordinated the effort. So I did a lot of the data gathering and compiling information for their team. And he did find, in many terms, that our education programs are helping the organization. But his conclusion that we ended up kind of actually stuffing away in a drawer and not sharing with the organization is that he thought our education team should take over all of the field education for even the international field projects. He thought it was so important that you had real trained educators on staff delivering not only your domestic education, but your field training, that he made that his first recommendation. So unfortunately, that wasn't something that the organization was ready to hear at that point, so we didn't get to share this evaluation very widely. We kind of just had to say, well, yeah, we did it, but yeah.
Who does the field education right now?
We have international programs teams. So
they're like a separate.
They're basically people who have degrees in development.
Okay.
So they're obviously very knowledgeable about development models and about the programs that are taking place in the field, But what his recommendation was is that you had some educators come on staff and help them really tailor their training so that it's delivered in, an adult learning style that was, anyway, that's just one of my interesting findings there. Another point about sustaining organizations with this type of education, and this comes from Grant. We're talking about what passes for public education in international NGOs tends to be slanted towards child sponsorship and emergency appeals. That stood out to me. What you often see is the poor starving child on TV, like holding out their bowl, and they need your help. Could you please send $5 so you don't have to feel guilty tonight before you go to bed and turn off the TV? That's what you get a lot from international NGOs. And that's not a sustainable model. That's a model for getting $5 here, $5 there, and for really playing on people's guilt more than anything. That's not educating anyone about how they can really make a difference in the world or how they can contribute to eradicating hunger and poverty. So this was another quote from this article, and it says, basically to facilitate a process of change, you need to involve the donors and the recipients in a mutual process of transformation. You need to find a way to connect them and make it feel like they're working together to make change. So what I have a picture of here, this is Kate Sheehan, and she's one of the community volunteer organizers. But what's happening in New England right now, which is really fascinating, is the Armenian diaspora community is fundraising for Armenia, for Armenia projects. And so it's this really interesting new model where we just got lucky and we had an Armenian on staff, and he knew people in the Armenian community in Massachusetts and in New York, and he's getting them excited about what's happening with Heifer in Armenia. So that's kind of a community that already exists. We're not creating that community, but we're building this mutual transformation process so that everybody's feeling like they're working together. And so this Kate was here with a group, and so after meeting a certain fundraising goal for a specific project in one community, the people from New England went and visited the project. This was like a year or two later, so they could see how their specific donor dollars had made a difference. This is a quote from Dr. Scriven, and it's kind of long, but basically what he's saying is that it's really simplified to think that education is just for fundraising. It does tons of other things for your organization. It's a staff recruiting effort. I'm a product of that. I went through the Global Village when I was 13 years old. It stuck with me. It was my first international experience. It shaped my whole life. I didn't go abroad until I was 19, but I knew I wanted to because I had been to the Global Village. It's a cooperation, partner-seeking effort. It's a way to educate your institutional donors about what you do. They don't want a pamphlet. They want to understand your model. They want a deeper understanding of how you work. Staff training. We don't send our staff to Heifer Village, but I've always argued that we should. Right when they come on board, send them out there, and they'll really know what we do, even if they're an accountant. Who cares? So anyway, he lists lots of other ways. Lots of other reasons that this kind of education is important to an organization. Okay, on to measuring impact. This little cartoon, can you guys read that? It says we should write that spot down. Anybody want to explain what they think that might mean? These guys are primitive humans. They're learning how to hunt and use weapons, right? And that time, it worked. They hit right on target. So this is kind of how we feel with our education programs. We know we're doing something great, but we're not exactly sure when it's working, per se. We know it's working. When is it working the best? What's the best method we should be using? So this gets into the discussion about how do you know if your programs are making a difference or not. There are a lot of different fields that are using global citizenship education. It's not just in education. It's not just in development. I found one example from a Spanish technical university that started sending their engineers abroad. And now, graduates from this particular university have a higher propensity towards working in that field. Like you have a lot more people joining Engineers Without Borders or different organizations. So the point I'm trying to make is that global citizenship education is taking place all over in lots of different fields, but nobody's talking about it together. And that wasn't really what this cartoon was about, but it is about measuring impact and about measuring where we're going with these programs. So, the European Consensus on Development says that whether or not it's defined explicitly as global citizenship education, it is making a significant contribution to the field. There are all kinds of programs taking place that are making people more globally aware, more interested in global social justice. And whether or not that is the original intent of the program, maybe it's just that they want their engineers to speak two languages. That is what's happening all over the world in lots of different fields. And my point with that is, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just,
okay.
I'm sorry.
So my point is, if that's what we're doing, why don't we just call it that? Qualitative or quantitative data? I think it was in PI last summer. Kevin posed a question, and I can't remember the specific question, but I'm going to make one up that's similar. Okay, Sabrina, you're going to buy a new Volkswagen Beetle, and you're not sure if it's the right car for you or not. Would you rather ask Paula about her Volkswagen Beetle and get her opinion and let her kind of sway you one way or the other? Or would you look in the Blue Book and read the facts and make your decision from there?
Probably
Both? Is there anybody who would lean more one way or the other? Opinions of your friends and people that you know, or the hard facts and data? What makes a bigger difference? David?
In the end, I would trust Paula. I would look at the facts, but if they didn't support what Paula said, I'd go with Paula.
Okay.
I would, me too.
Yeah.
I think that I would trust Paula, but if they all had the same part and everyone was saying them, then it would be like more credible for me than just one.
Okay.
It depends if Paula's really a car person or not. I would really, I'd take your opinion into consideration, but, if she wasn't a car person, I would probably lean more towards the facts.
Okay. So, there's a huge difference of degrees, right? It depends on who you are, how you process information, also where the information is coming from, if it's a trusted source or not. Okay? So, my point with this is that within Heifer, we had always tried to demonstrate impact with qualitative data. We had great quotes from students who'd been through our programs, like the young woman who was saying, it changed her life, she couldn't wait to get home and be an active, community member. But that's just one person. Okay, so did that merit the investment of paying for these programs for so many kids and keeping on staff members and keeping a facility open for just this one girl? And do we know that she actually did anything when she went home? I don't know. So a huge challenge to these types of programs is measuring impact, especially long-term impact, because nobody's tracking me to find out how that experience has influenced me up to this point, but also how did it not influence every other kid that's been through the program since then. What Scrivens and the WMU survey, evaluation of the programs did for Heifer was give them some really quantifiable data, really hard facts that they could show their programs are making a difference. So, sorry, when I printed this part printed really small for some reason, so excuse me for looking at my notes really closely, but I have some good statistics here I wanted to share. Scriven found that almost 25% of the students that have participated in the Global Village program went on to pursue education or careers in line with their new values, including majors in sustainable development, agriculture, or cultural anthropology. That's pretty big. That's a quarter of the students that went through the program. we have a residential volunteer program. So Holly was a staff facilitator, but there was a team of volunteer facilitators who were there for a semester running these programs. So that's actually another program, the volunteer program within the sites. So these volunteers, 19% of the residential volunteers stated that they had directly passed on their knowledge of Heifer's work and model to others. And 98% felt that they were now empowered to help end world hunger and poverty. So that's a good number too. Almost 70% of the ranch and farm volunteers have made financial contributions to Heifer, and 25% reported becoming a new donor to Heifer after volunteering. So that kind of goes back to the question of, this is a brand new donor, it was a new experience, and now they're a Heifer supporter. So those were just some of the facts, the hard data facts there that came out of the WMU evaluation. Yeah.
You may have covered this, I apologize if I missed it, but what motivated Heifer to have the evaluation done? I mean, it's kind of sounds like a big
Sure.
investment by such
There
an
was
important person.
the vice president of education at that time was really pushing for education to be seen as another program, another field program almost, instead of kind of a marketing effort.
Mhm.
And so every year there are several country evaluations done by the WMU team, and for the last 10 or 12 years. So she said, how about us? Can you guys come and do one for us? And she had to budget for it, but she did have to push for it as well. So there's just kind of one individual in their leadership. Does anybody have questions about impact or any comments before we move on? Okay. I'm going to go to the philanthropy section. And again, this is not something I planned on researching at all, but Sora pretty much pushed me and said, you're talking about an NGO, you're talking about donor education, why don't you use some philanthropy resources and just see if there's anything of interest there. So I'm guilty of the education for education's sake kind of mindset, and I kind of think fundraising is sturdy, which is a horrible thing to say. Obviously you want your organization to prosper and have enough money to operate, but as an educator sometimes it's like, well, I don't want to have to worry about that, that's not my job. But really everyone's working on the same team. So it was good for me to think about it from this perspective as well. Can everybody just raise your hand if you've ever donated to a nonprofit organization? Okay, please keep your hand up if you donated more than once to the same organization. Yeah. Okay. Did any of you ever volunteer with that organization? Okay, so if you, okay, and you're women. So that's interesting. Okay, not that we have a very good sample size, but okay. Okay, so some of the interesting findings in I used the Indiana University Center on Philanthropy. If anybody's interested in philanthropy from any perspective, they have vast resources, and I would recommend going to their website because they just published a lot of studies and they had all kinds of information. So that's where I got most of my information. But what I found is that there is a difference in donors with higher education and with higher incomes from donors with less education and lower incomes. And the difference is actually in how they think about their philanthropy. Donors with higher income and more education want to help make the world a better place. They want to feel like they've done something to improve the world. And that is just kind of vague. Okay? People with maybe less income, and that's possibly because there's less disposable income to make donations, and also maybe because in alignment with the people they're trying to help, want to help people improve their basic needs, and they want to help people help themselves. So it's kind of a slightly different perspective. And maybe I'll get back to that, but I thought that was an interesting distinction. I'll get back to that when I talk about messaging. Another interesting point is that everyone wants to volunteer more than they have in the past. And the center in Indiana found that because the majority of millennials and Gen Xers have less disposable income than their parents, they're seeking other ways to become involved with organizations that they enjoy. So they don't just want to give their money, they want to be active participants in these organizations. we learned at Heifer, volunteering can also be another source of education about the organization. Then I have a long page on information about women. And there was a huge study, it was Women Give 2010, about the power of women to change the world through their giving. And, okay, well, one of the first findings is that women drive the philanthropic decisions in wealthy households. So whether or not it's their money that they share and earn equally with their husbands, or their husbands only work, they're the ones making the decisions the majority of the time about what to donate to. In 90% of high net worth households, women are either the sole decision maker or an equal partner in decisions about charitable giving. Women give more than men. In almost every income bracket, they gave more than twice as much as men do. So when women are giving individually, they're giving more of their disposable income to their charities of choice. An interesting point here is that women are more interested in the efficiency and effectiveness of the organizations that they donate to. So they're more likely to check up, be on Charity Watch, and be making sure that their donations are going to where they said they were supposed to go. And they also don't necessarily support the same causes year after year if the organization's not living up to their expectations. So women are, well, I'm not going to make any judgments, but women want to support international development and global citizenship education. And this is kind of a broader discussion about women's giving interest. They're more likely in giving to community foundations, education foundations, and international organizations. And that was just another finding. So they're 50% more likely to support international and community causes than men. Yeah.
As opposed to what?
As opposed to men.
Like,
Oh,
what
okay,
do
so-
men support?
Some of the other fields, no, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I looked at that study. No, that's fine. I can't say off the top of my head. So, sorry about that.
That's fine.
Just tell me, but I'll try and get back to that by the end of the presentation, maybe. I can remember. They also want to volunteer more than men, and my notes got cut off a bit, but there was a high statistic, I believe it was in the 80s, about retired women volunteering for organizations that they supported. So a very high percentage of older women especially want to volunteer for their choice organizations. And then finally, they examined the Tiffany Circle, which is a Red Cross giving circle. It's kind of like a club. And so these women get together and make choices and have events and raise money to give to the Red Cross. And so they found that women are more interested in these networking opportunities for giving money to organizations. Okay, on to practical applicability, and this is where we were talking about scholarships. This would fell into, these are just my suggestions, and one way for Heifer and maybe other organizations to approach donor education and possibly fundraising, especially considering the philanthropy findings, would be to have your major donors, or people who we're talking about have higher incomes and maybe more education, receiving a different, more sophisticated message. And what that means is maybe diving in a lot more deeply to the development issues right off the bat. If we're assuming that these educated donors already have a base understanding of development work. Also using these giving networks so that they have an opportunity to build their own kind of communities to give money. What I envision in my mind is that these people could be educated about our education programs. So because the quote was, they just want to make the world a better place, why don't you do that through a gift of education to students who want to come to the ranch? And so by making a donation to our scholarship fund, or giving a percentage of your donation to our education fund, we can get more people involved in Heifer. That would allow groups and other individual donors without as much free income to give to the organization to still get involved, either through our education programs or just with tools to do community fundraising and organizing on their own. And then, of course, we want to increase volunteer opportunities for all donors. Okay, my final little suggestions for Heifer International, basically is what I've been saying all along, is that I think they should own up to offering global citizenship education instead of putting this on the back burner and kind of just having it be a one-off kind of project that they do. And one reason is I don't know if there will eventually be a push to internationalize curriculum in primary and secondary schools in the U.S., but if so, Heifer will be waiting in the wings with curriculum, with programs, and they'll be able to move right into all kinds of schools to promote themselves as well as offer these programs. That's what Oxfam does in the UK, and it's a great model to consider. Also, my other suggestion for Heifer is that they probably shouldn't consider these strictly fundraising tools and not expect that when you offer an education program, it can only be measured in terms of dollars, because there are all other kinds of effects. So, my research limitations. Sample size is one. I only looked at a few organizations, and all of them are international nonprofit organizations. I didn't look at any other kinds of organizations. I think it would have been interesting to look at some community, like a local NGO, to see how they operate their donor education programs, just to see how that might be different or similar. In the same way, there was no control group, so I wasn't looking at an NGO that didn't offer a global education curriculum of some sort. A lot of the data that I used is self-reported, so the Edukon study was self-conducted. A lot of the Heifer data was self-reported. Even for Scriven's evaluation, we collected the data initially, so there's always room for error, there's room for misinterpretation, and just not having a third-party perspective. And of course, there's a researcher bias because I work there, I have a passion for this. I was also a contributing member to the data collection process. So, in summary, the major finding is, in my opinion, global citizenship education is development education. It is donor education for INGOs. And that offering these types of programs is critical to the success of these INGOs. Donors do become more deeply involved and more committed to an organization after going through such programs, but they have to be offered the right kind of programs. And those opportunities have to be available. Also, I just think that some of these INGOs should take a little more time to examine their programs and see where they fit within the broader field of education. Again, these conclusions are: it increases donor loyalty. Impact is very difficult to measure. Donors are seeking communities of connection, and that's also important to connecting to the field. We need appropriate education opportunities and channels, and that global citizenship education matters, not only in the field of global citizen education, but to the world. These are my presentation sources. I hope they're all there. And now I would like to take questions, if you have any, please.
To what extent, I am intrigued by the, I wouldn't exactly call it a disconnect, but actually it's more the overlap between donor education and that sense the donor is also getting without using your terms, a larger sense of the world and the connections between the world, so the global citizen. To what extent do international NGOs work together to make the world a better place? Do they collaborate?
Yes, there is the Interaction Forum, which is a large consortium of development and other types of NGOs that are working to improve global state of the world, basically. But I don't think that there's a specific branch of Interaction that focuses on education in any form. I also know that there are marketing consortiums, so that there are groups that get together to talk about ways to communicate. I got to go to one of the marketing training sessions. So we had some specialists come from DC, and they could run all kinds of amazing data on our donors just from what was in our computers. I mean, they were able to really pull out information, and then they had also done surveys just in the U.S. at large to tell us more about who our donors were. So there are those resources, but not connected. I don't really know if that's answering your question or not.
Let me, sort of, I mean, I'm thinking there's a couple ways in which there is this overlap or disconnect. I mean, one is if this education is seen as marketing to get more donors,
Right.
but the education has a huge, I mean, that sense of developing education. So within an organization, and that sense of, you may educate me as a heifer project donor, but then I might say, wow, there's a lot of other stuff going on out here, so maybe I should give my money to, you know, Sabrina's or Tamara's or Paula's
Yeah.
project instead.
Yes.
And
That's actually what Heifer's trying to focus their education on right now. Because previously we had an internal measure, and it was called TSA, Taking Social Action. So we did an annual survey of participants from the last year. And we wanted to know, what did you do in the last year after your experience at Heifer to take social action? And it was vague. I've contributed money, but not to Heifer. I just contributed to a greater cause. I volunteered. Not necessarily to Heifer, but so now they're narrowing the focus, and they want to know, how are the education programs specifically improving Heifer's mission? And that's part of the education for education's sake versus education for building a donor community. But I do think there's a really fine line between we're just educating to get money and we're educating to build a community, because it is two different things. And every person that you educate may not donate to your organization, but that doesn't mean that it's a waste of your time or resources. That did make me think, David, that Heifer was invited a few years ago to present at the U.S. Summit for Global Citizenship Education, and they were like the oddball. All of the other organizations there were global citizenship organizations. That was their focus. That was their whole reason to enter. And Heifer was like, we're kind of doing this, we think, but we don't know how to talk about it yet. So I think that that's just a challenge, and that something that more of these organizations are going to find that not only that maybe they have a responsibility to do, but that they have the tools to do, is to help educate their donors and the population at large.
So, do you think they would really need to be changing their marketing message in order to position themselves as a
Yes, I do. That's kind of an internal debate, because like that, you know, the kid with the bowl, or Heifer's thing is that there's the kid with the goat. You know, buy a goat, make one kid happy, it's that easy. And that's a very, very simplified message. And I think in today's world, except for maybe children, you know, but really even children using our materials can understand more than that basic message. And so a lot of times I think marketing people want to like keep it simple and make sure that the message just gets out. Where on the other hand, if you want to be taken seriously as a development organization and not just a charity, you have to make sure people understand that you're doing more complex work than that. So.
Well,
Yeah, Heidi, go.
I would say that, well, there may be confusion if Heifer International isn't seeing themselves as this global citizenship kind of organization.
Yeah.
They're certainly not going to be promoting themselves in that way. So the way that they are utilizing marketing, they are utilizing their message is reflective of kind of how they're seeing themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if that gap can be closed, there may be more of a shift in the message that gets sent across.
Because if you go to the website and you look for education, you can't find it.
Yeah.
It's kind of dispersed in different sections. You have to know what you're looking for.
So it's a bit of an identity
It
crisis.
is. No,
You know, I mean,
definitely
and so, you know, marketing, if you know what, you have to know what your identity and message is in order to convey that. But if they're not seeing themselves that way, then there's gonna be a gap.
Yeah. Sabrina, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. This question's not fully formed. But in your presentation, you had one point in which you were trying to get sort of the high-level donors to get educated about the educational programs and give scholarships and things like that. Because your organization, your former organization, was a development organization, if somebody was coming from like a strictly development mindset, they might think this is taking money away from us. Like, if you were convincing a development department in a similar organization of the importance of kind of diversifying the money streams and the efforts, like what would, I mean, your presentation is the argument, but like in a sentence or something, how would you convince people who are strictly interested in development that global citizenship education is an important and a critical piece?
I've said the best way to make that argument is to put them through the programs.
Okay.
Because they speak for themselves. And
But
yeah.
let's say I'm a development professional. Sure, I go to the Heifer Ranch at school. I learned some things. But even still, like, I would think, like, okay, that just putting other people through that program is not going to help us raise money. Like,
sure.
if you're coming from like a classic development mindset.
Yeah. And that is one of the weaknesses of the programs that I think there's great room for improvement is on the take action piece. I think you have to be really specific about what are people supposed to do with this experience.
Because like David was saying, like, I think that somebody could go through that and then donate to any organization.
Yeah.
Like, how does, like, I understand that it's important, but like from a development perspective, in an organization, like,
Where's the line to
how
the
can
money?
I be convinced that this is going to give us money? And it's not going to take from our money stream.
Well, I mean, that's on both sides. That's an evaluation. You have to be able to show that it's really hard. It is really hard to